Tough question, like what is the blues? What is classical music? What is classic rock? I think classic rock, to do a total embodiment, is everything that kind of came out of the early to mid 60s and ended in the middle to late 70s. It's guys like me that were born in the 40s that were taking what Elvis and the Beatles had done, which was singles and pop music, because in the old days, you'd only hear of an artist with their single that got on the radio, then the next single, and then you'd hear, oh, they have an album, which would be their 3 singles and the B-sides, so there'd be 6 songs, and then some extra songs. And it was just us growing up trying to copy the great songwriting and play like them, like that Elvis had. And he was using a lot of Lieber and Stoller and Otis Blackwell writing his songs. Great mixture of black R&B, blues with the backbeat, making it rock and roll. And then with the Beatles, took all that stuff and recycled it again and brought it to a new generation. And then the next British invasion of the late 60s of the power trios, reinventing the American blues and bringing it back. So all of us growing up are trying to write songs and be like Otis Blackwell or Brian Wilson, writing for the Beach Boys, or Lennon and McCartney, or things like that, and writing our own kind of music with all these influences that came from where we grew up. Woodstock was really odd. We got asked to play it, and the Guess Who? We had just played the Seattle Pop Festival, maybe a month or so before it, and then another one in Portland, with like Led Zeppelin 10 years after, Sly and the Family Stone, The Byrds, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley. It was incredible. 3 days of beautiful sunshine. And then we went to Chicago to record the American Woman album at the RCA studio, brand new studio built just for us. So we get there and it's a brand new studio. And I get a phone call because I was the leader of the band. And your agent would then actually call you. There was no emails or texts or anything. I'd get a phone call or a fax, would go to your hotel, saying there's this festival going on in New York and it's just starting and do you want to come? But here's the downside. It's raining. There's not enough toilets. There's not enough water. There's a traffic jam. Some of the bands aren't showing up, but a lot of people are coming because there's this movement and wave of change and brother sisterhood, and let's get together and let's celebrate being alive and let's forget the bloody war in Vietnam for a weekend and let's just get naked and dance in the mud kind of thing, like little kids playing at a beach. And that night I look at the news. I'm in Chicago and it shows the traffic lineups and it's raining and there's mud everywhere. Bands couldn't really play. Some bands played at 3 in the morning when everyone was asleep, but it was captured. So Woodstock turned into this mythical, wonderful, cool thing. A lot of bands were cut out of there because it was raining and their things shorted out and they weren't as good. But the ones that stayed in there, that made the bands. That made Crosby, Stills and Nash. That was their first gig that they played on stage because they were a studio band up to that. It made 10 years after, made them huge. You know what I mean? It made some bands hugiantic because they were there and they were part of that whole thing. And guess who missed that? Because it looked like a disaster. You don't know when these things are in the middle or about to happen, what the outcome is going to be. But we stayed in Chicago and in 10 days cut an album and single that went to #1 in the world in all the 3 trades, Record World, Cashbox, and Billboard, and all over the world, and became the calling card for Canada and America to the rest of the world. So who knows what would happen if we hadn't stayed there and gone and done Woodstock. We might have been a bigger band, obviously, like Santana, the guys who played there, that was like a big kick up for them. But we might not have recorded the same version of American Woman or had the same vibe in it. It's one of these crossroads where let's take this road, and both roads turned out okay, and you can't be 2 places at once. So I mean, that was our fate and destiny at the time. If you could imagine how hard it is to be, even right now, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or Obama, that there's people out there that want to shoot you. It's like the Kennedy assassination. And if you're an artist on stage and you're playing to 20 or 30,000 people, there is no security there. So I don't think guys want to put themselves out there. It's it's really scary. I mean, I've played shows and there's been threats that come backstage, written, and you go out, well, I got to go out there and play. You have everybody watching, And that's why if a guy comes up on stage and starts running towards you, you got security that gang tackle him. Because I've had guys run on stage with knives. They unplug your guitar. They will unplug your foot pedal and jump into the crowd and take your pedal. There's nut jobs out there. This is the old days. Now, guys have got knives and guns and bombs. I mean, it's really scary. I mean, look at what they did at the Boston Marathon. What's the next thing going to be? Lollapalooza? Do you know what I mean? Or one of these rock fests? Crosby, Stills, Nash. Those guys are the old-fashioned, let's put our career and lives and reputation on the line. A lot of these guys still put their career on the line. Hence, no airplay. The American Woman kind of came out of nowhere, and then it took on this specific meaning. And we were on such a roll at that time, because we had These Eyes, Laughing, She's Come Undone, No Time, and No Sugar Tonight, and then radio was on such a roll of playing us, they didn't realize American Woman in essence was an anti-war protest song, but a very light-hearted one. Not like 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for? We don't give a damn, who cares what, like Country Joe's song. This was like kind of a mild thing, and because radio at that time was instructed to not play any anti-war songs, or you'd lose your license. Oh, wow. So they would play Barry Sadler, Sergeant Barry Sadler, Fighting Men of the Green Beret, all these let's go to war songs. They wouldn't play What Are We Fighting For, Country Joe, or any other protest songs. P.F. Sloan had a song called Living on the Edge of Destruction that got very minimal airplay. It was like banned. So instead of banning our song, radio just embraced it as another song by the Guess Who, and it was suddenly #1, and somebody pointed out, isn't there a lyric in there that we don't want your war machines, you know, the kind of thing, and stay away from me? And by then it was too late, it was #1 song. I think some of the big bumps, the really good bumps in music were the Elvis era, like the late 50s. All the guys like him. The Eddie Cochrans, the Gene Vincent, the Rick Nelsons, who are all a solo guy who are really good looking, doing rockabilly and rock and roll. And then there was the Beatles and that era of the Stones and the Animals and the Beatles. And in America we had the Beach Boys and the Four Seasons. All of that music kind of happened when America needed and wanted, or the world, because America was basically leading the world then, they needed and wanted a change. They wanted to leave behind their parents' music. I wanted to leave behind my parents' Benny Goodman and Tommy Dorsey and, you know what I mean, Frank Sinatra music. And then when I heard Jerry Lee Lewis and Elvis and Chuck Berry, it was like, wow, this is my music. And the parents hate it, so as a kid you love it. Then that happened again with the Beatles and the Stones. But politically, the world was ready at that time. There was, you know, the end of the Vietnam War. There was the JFK assassination. These other things that happened. The whole world is heartbroken, heartsick, and mind blown by these things that have happened in the world. And suddenly this music comes out that is a soothing tonic for everybody's emotions and broken heart and soul, and is like reaching for the future. And you get it and embrace it. I think punk out of England appealed to a lot of people. Britain is a very oppressed economy. It's still the royalty and the upper class, which is about 10%, and everybody under that is the lower class. And everybody is pissed off. Everybody hails the Queen, I don't know why, or the royalty, and I don't know why they get such press. They have incredible press, PR people, these royalty guys, because they do nothing except take all our tax money and fly around the world in their yachts and cut ribbons at malls and things like that. So the taxes you pay in England are horrific, and they were worse back then. They're better now. Even now, they're not good. So the average man is suppressed. You make £100 a week, and you've got to pay 60 in taxes, and you've got a wife and 2 kids, and you can't afford a car or anything there. So punk was like the voice of the working man, screaming and shouting. And they go out and have a pint, and they get to scream their heads off. F you, Margaret Thatcher, F you, Tony, you know, Blair or whatever, and whether the figureheads change, it's still against the government, the Queen, or that kind of thing. So I think punk was important. It shut down a lot of the dance music. It brought back some emotion to rock and roll. The early days of rock and roll, like people try to put us down, talk about that was a rebellious song. I mean, why don't they all? And you want him to say the F word, but he says fade away. Do you know what I mean? Like why don't you all F off? I mean, it was so close, and to get that on radio was groundbreaking. I mean, I was in England when that came out by The Who, like 66, 67. That was an amazing record to get on there. And at the end, they go berserk and smash everything. And this is on radio, top 40 little songs. This was a big bust out for commercial radio to play The Who, My Generation. That was a big deal. Classic rock is still there and alive. There's like some of the survivors are still out there playing and really enjoying the magical life that we've had as little kids with a dream, wanting to be like Elvis or Gene Vincent or Eddie Cochran, or wanting to be like the Beatles or the Stones, or wanting to be like the Beach Boys, or wanting to be like Hendrix or Clapton or Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page. You've got to want that you want to be like, and you and your buddies all copy Zeppelin, or you all copy, whoever your band is, and you emulate them and copy them, and suddenly you have your own hit, and you kind of keep going. And that's a dream, and to have it still going after decades and decades, it really it should be called Classic Dreams instead of Classic Rock, because it's amazing that we all had the same dream. We were all, if you look at it, we're all inspired by what I just mentioned, the Elvis era, the Beatles era, and then the later 60s, the power trios from England. And if you're more soul, it was the Motown and Stax and that kind of thing, Radio exists to play commercials. That's why singles became so short. Radio was suddenly, wow, let's sell commercial time and let's play commercials. And if you want your record played, it's got to be under 3 minutes long, because then we get to play another commercial every 3 minutes. And if your song's 4.5 minutes long, in the day we're not playing 3 or 4 commercials. In the old days, it was so hard to get airplay that when pirate radio started in England, which was off of the coast of England in the channel, the English channel between France and England, where there was no recording, no FCC rights or broadcasting restrictions, they anchored this boat, this barge, out in the British Channel. It was called pirate radio. Mm-hmm. And they could play whatever they wanted. So they blatantly came out and said, we'll play your new record, and you have to pay us £1 a second to get your record played. That's how a lot of records broke. Pirate radio broke it, broke one of our records in the early Guess Who. And we got played in London on BBC, and then we got listed in the Billboard charts, the top 20 in the BBC Billboard charts. That was a big deal, that we had to buy that time for the airplay. That's what they do now to manufacture these artists. You actually buy airtime. And if you're a management company, you've got the new Brittany Falufa, whatever her name is, and you think, well, let's invest $1 million. Our return on this will be triple. We'll get 3 million back. Or let's invest 2 and we'll get 6. Or let's invest 3 and we'll get 9 or 10. Because once you get that airplay going, the next single's much easier, and the public accepts it. And this is going to be a short ride of 18 months, and this person's gone. And then we'll get the next person. Labels now, I've got some new artists that I'm trying to help out. The labels won't do anything. They say, do it yourself. Put up little 6-second clips on Vine, make them longer, and then refer to your YouTube. And once you build up a following of 300,000 views or something, then come and see us. So they want you to do all the work. They don't have any development money. Mm-hmm. And the way it is now with the internet, you almost don't need a record label. You just start your own website, you do your own YouTubes, you start playing gigs, you get a fan following, everybody twits and tweeters and Facebooks each other and everything, and then suddenly you're selling a couple of 100,000 or millions of records, and then a record label calls you saying, we want to take you around the world. And that's how Justin Bieber happens, or Shawn Mendes, or anybody like that, who basically is kids who've been in their basement or their rec room, like a Wayne's World thing, doing videos. They're 10, they're 11, they're 12, they're 14, they're 15, suddenly have hundreds of thousands of followers, and a record label says, oh great, let's spend $10 on this kid. And they give you a deal. But in the old days, you got an album, the A&R guys actually came to your house where you rehearsed. They helped you pick the songs. They kind of had a sense where the market was going or what radio would play. And they picked your singles and put them out to radio stations, because your singles were basically a sample of what was on your album, of your musical style and your influences.
Whereas now it's more important just about the single, not even the album.
Now it's all singles. So, And the singles now are singles. When I was young, singles had a B-side. So you paid your dollar, your 99 cents, you got 2 songs, right? Now you just get the one song for the one download. So in a way, people are being cheated out of the joy of discovering a B-side. And so many B-sides turn into being the enduring song and the hit. Because the A song's just kind of missed. You never know really what's going to be a hit. You just got to release what you think's your best or your most unusual track. I hope it catches somebody's ears. A power trio like Hendrix or Cream or Zeppelin came, and I called Zeppelin to a power trio because basically 3 musicians and a singer. I mean, the raw power of that, guitar, bass, and drums. That's what I tried to do in my new album, was get that raw power where there's so much freedom. Because the bass is on the bottom, they can do whatever they want, and the drums are somewhere in the middle, and your guitar and voice are on top, and you're not clashing with each other. With more musicians, there's less, you have to play less. Not that we overplayed, we just had freedom to do what we felt like doing at the moment. And I so hope that would happen again. I think it might be happening, but I also think that the younger bands, and this is a fact, like I don't want to name names, but there are bands who actually play their instruments, who've had musical lessons, who grew up down south and are playing the blues or playing folky blues or whatever. They don't have the songwriting chops that I consider to be really great songs. That's why younger kids, the young kids, still like classic rock. In that 3.5 minutes, and most classic rock songs are pop songs. Because a really successful classic rock song is really a pop song. It's the best of the best, all compacted into 3.5 minutes. And when it gets to the chorus, the second time, you can sing that chorus. I've written a lot of songs with a lot of people, male, female, 20 years older than me, 20 years younger than me. The creative process is different every time. And I would say it's different within every band. There's usually 1 or 2 people in the band who are the spokesmen. So when I was writing in the Guess Who or in BTO and I had a singer, I would want him to sing and like those lyrics, or he wouldn't sing it right, or he wouldn't sing it at all. He'd want to write one of his that I didn't think was good and I didn't want to play guitar on. So there's this, you got to write together. So hence you get a Lennon and McCartney writing together to please each other, and a Jagger and Richards to write each other, and a Brian Wilson and Mike Love writing together. And there's a certain compromising that you do when you're writing a song. Like, I want to use a certain word and you say it's too harsh. We've already used it twice. You don't want to use the same word over and over again. So you find other words for car. You use automobile or wheels or something like that. And you're saying the same thing. It's a vehicle.
So there's a lot of clashing of ideas going on.
Yes, there's a lot of that. And then I think more people like the song because it appeals to 2 personalities. Like when I was in the Guess Who writing with Burton Cummings, he was born to be wild, I was born to be mild. He was the Lennon, I was the McCartney, that kind of thing. He was the Richards, I was the Jagger. I was the more sensible one, the more cooler one. And we were still respect each other musically, but we had different personalities when we were off stage. And that came out in the music. And that clashing of ideas makes great music. You're not waiting and waiting and waiting 2 minutes for the chorus of She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah. It starts with She Loves You, Yeah, you know what I mean? The Beatles started their songs with the chorus. It's been a hard day's night, blam, the chord, and then it starts. So they tell you what you're getting right away, and you sing along right away. Drum machines came in, sampling a drummer. Why get a guy who's been playing drums for 20 years, who's kind of a jerk who's always late, when you could buy Keith Moon's drum samples or John Bonham's drum loops in a Linn drum machine, or now in these days in GarageBand or one of your computers. You get all John Bonham's loops. That's what I used for doing my demos from Blues. Got a John Bonham loop. Are you kidding? And I do a riff and suddenly it's, I'm Led Bachman, that kind of thing. And then I write my own song and nobody really knows where that came from. But there's actually, you can buy drum loops that'll say Bozo, which was his nickname, or Bonham, or something like that, JB loop kind of thing. Some of these new songs with the rap, I mean, and I admire the rap guys and hip hop guys. The lyrics are incredible. They're kind of poetic in their own way. And I did a lot of stuff with rap guys that I thought was really verbal diarrhea in a way. But when I really sat with these guys and saw what was behind their music, I gained a whole new respect for them. And that a lot of stuff is political commentary. And they're not using 7-syllable words. These are all 4-letter words that they're using that are real street talk. And then they say, and then to lighten it up a little bit, we put in silly rhymes once in a while. And I was doing this whole songwriting thing with Shad, who's like a really good rapper from here in Toronto. And he would go into the mic, and the whole crowd would do it. Then he would say, tell me something and I'll rap about it. And we'd really say some heavy things about schools, nurses, doctors, the police, whatever, murders, war. And then there'd be a light verse where he would just say, da 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 da, and she smells like vinegar. And you go, what? You know, then he gets back to a heavy thing. So there was I learned a lot just doing that kind of thing with him. Once in a while, they rhyme words that you go, what?
Yeah.
What? Mm-hmm. Toothpaste? You know, how does that go with, you know, but you can't hammer everybody with like 4 minutes of heavy lyrics. You got to have a relief thing. That's what kind of rock and roll is. Tell your stories in the verses, and your choruses are the repetitive, taking care of business thing. Then you get to your storyline again, you know. Suddenly it was acceptable to show up with a DAT, a digital audio tape. I don't think there were CDs yet, or vinyl, of your track and sing to it. So you're a disco singer, you showed up, you had an album that had 4 tracks on it, each was maybe 10 minutes long, 2 aside. And you played it, you went up and sang, I love you baby, I love you baby. Everybody was dancing, nobody cared about the lyrics. This was stand-up dance music. Club owners loved it. Instead of paying a band $3,000 or $4,000 a week for 4 or 5 guys in a band in the rodeos and the roadies, he was paying a singer $250 a night. And the rest of the night play records and have somebody come out for like 15, 20 minutes a night as the featured performer and sing their big hit. So it was a revolution in money and in sound, and suddenly rock bands were out of business. They retired. BTO broke up. ZZ Top broke up, but they didn't really break up. They just said, okay, we've been doing this for like 10 years. You go buy your ranch, you buy your boat and sail around the world. Rush didn't break up. They took a hiatus, which was smart. I wish BTO would have done that in retrospect. And let's see what happens, and maybe get back together in 5 or 10 years. Those who got back together 10 years later are still here, intact. ZZ Top, Rush, there's a few, Aerosmith, amazing. They went through that thing of drugs and rehab and let disco come and have its way and let punk come, and then people will come back to us, to our music. I'm headed out now to do a classic rock tour with Dwayne and Devin Allman and Peter Frampton, really old friends of mine from the 70s. And we started playing when we were 5 and 6 and 7 years of age. Now, it could have been piano, a violin, whatever, but we had music in us, and we were forced by our parents to practice every day. Then we got a guitar. They didn't have to force us anymore. We had to go hide out with our guitar because we wanted to learn this stuff and eat this wonderful food that was being given to us, music food, from the Chuck Berrys and Elvises and Bo Diddleys and Arethas and Beach Boys and everybody else who was on the radio. So consequently, there's a difference in most classic rock bands, even though we were all basically 2 guitars, bass, and drums. I'm talking about the early 70s now, or late 60s, early 70s, because of where we grew up. The only national music we had at that time was American Bandstand on every Saturday morning, and the Ed Sullivan Show, which was on every Sunday night, where they'd have one band, like the Animals or the Stones or somebody like that. So that was the only way we could see these kind of people. Everything else was regional. So I grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So whatever the radio played there influenced me, Burton Cummings, Neil Young, the guys who were growing up there as teenagers in Winnipeg. Same with Toronto was different. It was more R&B in Toronto. Same with Chicago and LA. So you were influenced by whatever you grew up listening to, that you bought or your parents bought or your older brothers and sisters bought, and you assimilated that music and then you created your own. You listen to an old record now on Atlantic or Sun or one of the old labels from the late 50s through the 60s and 70s. It was just guys rocking out in a studio. Also, everything was done then in real time. There was no click tracks, with a real band who actually rehearsed before they went into a studio and learned some original songs and just went in and jammed the song out and took it 3 or 4, 5 takes and picked the best take. And if you could, if it wasn't mono, if it would progress to stereo, or 4-track or 6-track or 16-track, you can go back and fix a bad solo or a bad lyric or a bad note or something. Other than that, you took the best performance with mistakes and everything and released it. It was also done on tape, which made a real difference to the sound. because it was because it was the soundtrack of our lives growing up as teenagers, creating the music, and all our friends who were buying the music, and we were also buying it.
Yeah.
It became the soundtrack to your life. We just came through another year and another Christmas, and I've got grandkids now, and all they wanted for Christmas was this magical thing that goes around, and this magical thing that you put on it, that music comes out of, because they're so used to iPod and actual speakers in the living room. So my daughter called me and said, my kids want a record player and records. And I said, are you kidding? Go in there. My parents' old Viking record players there from Eaton's that you open up. It was a radio on one side and a turntable on the other that had 78s, 45s, and 33. And my records are still there. I also got a jukebox that plays 45. Just go and get it out of storage. And so she takes it, and her kids are going, and they put on their first record. And this is like kids who are like 10, 12, 14, 16. And they're going, wow, that sounds warm. Mom, why does that sound so warm? Well, there's tubes in there. Feel them. They're hot. Did that make any difference? Did it make the music warm? Yes, it did. And also, analog and tubes and tape had second and third harmonics. The sound, we grew up on distortion. Right? We love distortion. Elvis screaming, Little Richard screaming, the Beatles, Revolution, the guitar that starts that was all distortion. Suddenly it all gets cleaned up for digital, because digital can't translate distortion. If you get too loud in digital, it becomes an explosion. Like I've been trying to mix a kick drum going boom, boom, and it goes pow, pow. It actually is an explosion or a big crackle. So kids now are noticing the warmth of records. Vinyl is making a comeback. I think the whole switch to CDs was a big, huge scam. Neil Young has proved, and he's kind of a genius in his own right, he's proved that the guy who did the algorithms to convert analog music to digital had imperfections in it. And so everything sounds square and small and tiny. Neil Young went back and recalculated. He's put out this thing called the Ponos that will recalculate or retranslate your music. You just plug your output into this little triangular thing that looks like a little Toblerone bar, like the little triangular thing, and out of that into your headphones or your speakers, and your music becomes alive, and it adds a second and third harmonics that sometimes you can't hear until it's missing, and you just hear the signal. But when you hear an old analog thing, there's the signal, and there's this cloud of something cool around it that's your natural and your second and third harmonics that kind of just make it more listenable. It's kind of like if I pushed my finger in your face or my whole hand. There's a big difference in that, or in your chest, you know, like this thing would hurt and a nice gentle push would feel, oh, okay. So digital music is kind of like poking you in the head and the ears, and then analog's like embracing you because it's so warm. So I sense that trend. The whole digital scam of having to go away from our beautiful 1 foot square artwork that was basically classic rock shrunk down to this little thing. The minute you open it, the lid broke off. You had to buy another lid. The whole thing was like a money grab. And then changing all of the shelves and every record, because everybody's shelves were 12 and a half inches, right? So your 1 foot square album would fit in. Those were all gone and thrown in the bins. So suddenly the guys are selling you new shelves to hold CDs. And they make the CD package when you buy it. It's in a plastic that you need a blowtorch or a hacksaw to get into. The minute you rip open this outer package and open your lid, the hinges break off. So there's like a built-in obsolescence there that was such a rip-off of us guys who wanted to hear all our favorite music, because the biggest sellers in CDs at first was us, classic rock guys. Oh, I don't need to play my old sticky fingers anymore that's all scratched. I'll buy the new digital one. And there's no more tape in cars. Tape is phenomenal. In England, there's a big resurgence of cassette tapes. You put it in, you hear the playback like it was in the studio. Hasn't been converted and made into an MP3 or MP4 and put on this digital disc and then played in your radio. So there is some sort of a revolution. I don't know where it'll lead. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, because there's always these big powers who make these decisions and force them on us, and we buy them. If you ever saw The Big Short, I just saw that. It's sickening. It's a great movie, but it shows us that we are out of control. When you look at the ISIS oil crisis that's going on, all this stuff seems to basically be over religion and oil. If you look at the record business, it's all about money and manufacturing artists to make as much money as possible. And then there's still the guys like me who are true the minstrels of the time who go from village to village and play in the town square. It could be called the auditorium or the hockey rink, but we're still there playing the music that we wrote as kids, and the people still come to enjoy it. So we could find a way to take this classic rock and make it and bring it back. Wouldn't the world be? It would certainly sound better. I wouldn't say it would be a better place, but certainly sound a lot better. Well, I can't encapsulate, I can't even say why the industry does what it does. I can't explain why classic rock radio doesn't play stuff by guys like me who are putting on better albums than I've ever put out. My Heavy Blues album is some of the best stuff I've done, jammed live off the floor. We've got a new band, a female drummer and a bass player, and we just went nuts in the studio, did everything in the first or second take, and you could sense the great vibe and feel of us sweating and perspiring in the studio like it was a club, a Saturday night jam at a club. That often doesn't happen. It's somebody sitting at a computer and everything is just metronomic and right in beat and everything's pitch corrected. On this album that's full of mistakes and I'm singing off key and off pitch and we just left it because it was charming is kind of the word, or real or natural. So I can't explain why the industry does that. I can't explain why classic rock radio doesn't play the classic rock artists anymore, even on a featured show on a Saturday night or a Sunday night, or play 2 for 1. Here's Bowie then, here's Bowie now. Here's Mark Bolan now, or here's Tears for Fears, and here's Orland now with his new band. And give us a shot, because we're still out there touring. We're making more money than ever. We're still playing live. And the radio stations could actually promote us like they did in the old days and have Classic Rock Fest, which is what Classic Rock Magazine does in England. They own the market. There's Classic Rock Magazine, they own Classic Rock Radio. They've now expanded to progressive rock, country rock, vintage rock. They have all these festivals all over. They have their own couple of radio stations that play this music, and the fans are in the millions and legions, and they're building and holding on to careers. I want to go move to England.
Yeah, but then you might actually get mixed up with The Who if you go to England, right?
No, Pete Townshend's doing what he's doing. We all have new records out. Give them a listen. I heard a new track by Aerosmith, it blew me away. I heard a new Stones, it blew me away. I heard a Neil Young, it blew me away. In England, I heard, oh my God, Tears for Fears, Bernie Marsden, Whitesnake. Everybody's back. The survivors have survived. They're making great music. Give us a shot. Play 2 for 1. Play an old one and a new one. You'll change the world. Radio could be the new radio instead of internet being the new radio.
Awesome.
There's my thoughts.
Still believe in the power of rock and roll music.
Hey, thanks for watching. My name is Daniel Sarkissian. I'm an independent filmmaker from Toronto.
I hate that guitar, but I can play that in one scale.
Don't you dare laugh.
You know, I try to embrace the rock and roll spirit in the sense of I do everything self-funded and independently made with no oversight. As such, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for watching.